In this lesson, we're going to design our NFT using Blender. This is assuming you already have a car model ready to use, whether you've created your own or imported it from elsewhere. If you don't have a car model to bring in, you can check out another course where I'll show you how you can create one straight from scratch. I'll link that in the bonus section of this course. Assuming now that you have a car to use for your NFT, we'll go over a few guidelines. These guidelines will help frame your artwork in the best possible way. So the key concepts to designing your own NFT will be to keep things simple and make your car the focal point as the NFT, which means you don't want to add in too much background details that will distract from the main focal point, which is your car. Sure, you could go outside these guidelines, but it may not always work out. So with that in mind, let's get started with creating our 3D car NFT. I'll show you how to make a road for your car step by step, along with some background elements to capture in your final render. So here we go. Okay, so now here is our car rig that we have ready to go. So we want to first create a path for this car. Make sure that the cursor is to world origin by pressing Shift and S. Selecting cursor to world origin, and we will see the red white dotted circle in the center there. That's where we'll create our new mesh. So we'll create a curve, Shift A, and curve, and select path. We can rotate it on the Z axis by 90 degrees and scale it up, pressing S. We won't make it too big since we're just going to test out the path for our car. So next, what we'll do is we will select the path and hit Control and select the car rig next. Then we'll go into pose mode, and we can see here in the bone properties, we can select the target for our path, which is the path we just created. So we'll do that and click fix position and follow curve, so that when we have the offset to 0, as it increases, it moves along the path all the way to 1. We got our path set up. That's working now. Next, we can create a plane for our road. So Shift A and select Mesh Plane. Then next, we'll go into the shading viewport and hold Z, go to Material View. This we can see kind of half rendered how the road will look as we create it. So we'll make sure we're in object mode, and we need to add in a new material. Click New Material, and we get this node here. But we're going to have to add in more nodes, so either add by pressing the button on the top tab there. You can press Shift A and add in a brick texture, which will need 2 of them. So one of the brick textures will connect the color to the base color. It's going to look like this, white and gray bricks, and we want both of the colors to be white, since that will be our dash lanes for our road. And you can mess around with the scale a bit. I find that about motor size around 0.125 works, and you can adjust the scale from there. And make sure the motor smoothness is 0. So about motor size 0.120 is fine as well. And here you can adjust the brick width and the brick height to your liking. So for now, that's kind of good. We can move on, as we'll come back to this later. So move to our second brick texture and put it into base color. And now both colors will be black, and the motor is going to be yellow, which is going to be our dividing line. We'll also set the motor smooth to 0 and just play around with the values, but 0.01 works for me for motor size, and a scale just to start out at 2 is kind of fine. Come back to that later. We'll add in a mix RGB node and connect the two colors into it. This will mix the colors to both work at the same time. So we got something like this, but we need more nodes, so we'll add a mapping node and a texture coordinate node. We'll place the vector nodes from the mapping to the other vector nodes and select the UV and connect it to vector to mapping. And what this will do is allow us to change the scale at the same time for both of our brick textures, so that we can get the desired road line result. Might have to change a few other values to make it work. The scale here for the yellow motor, I have to get to about 5.1, and that seems to work. So you can also change the scale of the X value to get as little or more dash lines as you want. So now to get rid of the yellow lines on the outside, we'll go to the UV editing viewport and we'll select the cube on the left, press S to scale and Y to scale on the Y axis, and this will allow you to drag the yellow lines a bit further out, like so. Now that looks pretty good. So now that we've got the road set up like this, we need to create some texture. We'll add in a color ramp and a noise texture, and we'll hook up the factors together. We'll now need another mix RGB node, so we'll hook up the color to color 2 from the color ramp, and then we will shift some of these nodes around and connect the yellow and white line to the new mix RGB node, and then we will mix the texture and color together into our base color now for a new modified texture, like so. And this is how it's going to look in the beginning before we adjust some things. So we're going to have to add 2 more nodes so that we can get a grainy texture along with this white noise texture we've already put in. So we'll add in a bump node and a Musgrave texture. We'll connect the height to the bump height and get the bump normal to connect to the normal on the principled BSDF node. Just wait for it to load, and you get now that grainy texture with white noise. So now you can play around with the factors and adjust the scale details from the noise texture. So if there's less or more of that white noise, kind of that faded look on the road. And then you can go to the Musgrave texture and scale it up to create that kind of asphalt grain texture. We're starting to get a road that looks realistic. We can also increase the roughness on the principal BDF node, so that'll make it much more darker. You can add some metallic value, a tad. Transmission won't do much. That's more for creating glass effect. So we'll go leave that back at 0. So there we go, we've got our nodes all set up. Basically, this is the starting point for a road, so that's looking pretty good. Now we can connect it to our path. So we'll add a curve modifier, but before we do that, we should rotate the piece around since it's not going to line up with the car properly, like so. So we'll disconnect the path and we'll rotate the road 90 degrees on the z-axis. And then now we can scale it up, press S to scale, and get it matching so it fits in. And then now we can connect it to the path. And since that's all lined up, we can now scale the road and move it accordingly to match with our car, like so. Looking pretty good. And then here we can make the yellow line a little bit thinner. So to increase the value, we'll make the line much more narrow. I got about 0.04 for this motor size. And here for the white lines, I adjusted them again. And I got the motor size about to 0.1235, which looks something like this. It looks a lot better with the scale. So we'll go with that. We can add in another modifier, an array modifier, which will increase the count. We'll merge it and increase the count of the road piece along our path. And that's it. That's part one of creating our road on our NFT. So in part two, we're going to go over and start adding in some background elements and camera angles to tie this all together.